Today we're going to look at three interconnected topics: entrepreneurship, creativity, and innovation. And within that, we want to start with creativity. And with creativity, we want to think about that as a way, one, of generating ideas. Now, as we have ideas, we want to think about, where is it going to make things better? Is it going to make things more comfortable? Can I create a product or a service that's going to be more efficient or more effective? And in that model, there are various ways that creativity can come forward. One is certainly the process of, when you think about creativity, you may think, well, I'm creative or I'm not, or my friend is creative or they're not. But what we find is that, much like building a financial statement or doing a marketing plan, there are some tools and techniques to help you be more creative, to help you find creative solutions. The other piece of the puzzle is there may be people that you can bring into the fold. If you have friends or family that are creative, if you have founders or other individuals that are creative, and that are just known for coming up with the crazy ideas and having novel solutions to things, incorporating them into your decision making, even if it's just to bounce ideas off of, is very valuable as well. So when we think about creativity, we're going to look at it both from the process as well as from the people standpoint. So again, some people think they're creative or think they're not creative, and they may be right. But just as entrepreneurial skills can be taught and learned, creativity skills can be taught and learned. And you'll see at a number of universities, there are an increasing number of courses in creativity, and there are a lot of books and articles and resources that are out there to help you be more creative in what it is that you're doing. And we'll talk about a few of those. One thing that certainly helps is some background in the topic matter. Why does that make sense? Why does it make sense that you're going to have more creative solutions if you know something about the topic?
Because you could think of further in depth about the topic, because have a little background knowledge about it. So.
Okay. You can think further in depth about the topic because you have a deeper understanding or you have a background in it.
You know the strengths and weaknesses, so I guess you know where to start.
Okay. You have a sense of some of the strengths and weaknesses, maybe things that have been tried in the past that either worked or didn't work, so you're just better versed on what some of the candidate ideas could be or should be. And so in that way, again, one way of improving your creativity is having more in-depth knowledge and experience in the subject matter. There's also this element of incubation and ideas, and I think a big piece that's often missed is evaluation. If we're faced with some problem, we tend to want to come up with a solution and implement. What's the problem with that? There's an idea, we implement. What pieces are missing?
Well, you don't know if it's a good idea.
Is it a good idea? We typically implement the first idea. We typically try and solve something with the first thing that we think of. And oftentimes, that's wrong and or suboptimum, and that if you evaluated that, and or if you generated several ideas, it might be that second, third, or fourth idea that turns out to be the better of the lot, or there might be some combination. And or if you're doing things as a group, there's a solution you came to bear based on input of the group rather than just of the individual. So in that way, again, the creativity element and the creative process is something that, with knowledge and background, is certainly helpful, but I would say more helpful to engage some other people in the solution, more helpful to evaluate that and recognize, well, what is the problem that we're trying to solve and how are we going to evaluate its success? So recognizing relationships is a piece of that. And what we mean there is that you're looking at things that are different or somewhat unorthodox. There's a company in the U.S. called Borders. Borders Books and Music. Heard of it? Went out of business. They were a Barnes & Noble competitor. Borders Books and Music was based in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And in 2003, I worked on a consulting engagement with them to help them figure out what they should do, if anything, about digital music. And 2003 was a time where you typically went to the bookstore, went to the record store, bought your CD, or you went to Amazon and you bought your CD. You did not typically buy a track. Why did you not buy a song?
Because the music company didn't allow it.
Music companies did not release individual songs with much frequency. Now, maybe there was one song from an album that you could pay $3 or $4 for that song versus paying $12 or $15 for the entire CD. But again, singles were rare and infrequent. And getting them on your MP3 player was even more of a challenge. Now, you could buy the CD. You could plug your MP3 player into your computer, and you could get the songs from the CD that you purchased to your MP3 player. But there wasn't such a thing called iTunes. There wasn't such a thing called iPod or iPhone. And there was no really access to be able to get music on a per song basis in 2003. Why did Borders care? Why did Borders care about the future of music and then the future of digital music?
To compete
With?
Barnes and Noble.
Okay. So there's Barnes and Noble that kind of do what we do, and we want to know what they're doing and be competitive. What else were they concerned about?
Well, if someone else is doing the same thing, trying to figure out how to make it better.
Okay. They expected that someone was going to come along and do some novel things in the digital music space, that someone is going to sell a CD that you can download directly to your MP3 player, and someone might even be able to convince the music companies to sell on a per song basis for 99 cents as opposed to a per album basis for $12. What else drove them to be concerned about that marketplace? You could find your song online. Where were you finding your song?
Napster.
YouTube?
Napster. So I had a free, pirated repository of any song that I wanted. So they too were trying to find a way, how do we compete with free? How do we compete with pirated? But again, a bricks and mortar store. So what did they also want?
A digital store.
They wanted, you say a digital store. Okay, so they were some online element, but what do you, if you're paying rent on a bricks and mortar facility, what do you want?
Customers at your bricks and
You want people to come into the store. You want them to buy the coffee. You want them to buy the beignets or whatever else it is that you can get at your Starbucks inside of your Barnes and Nobles. Again, Borders also had their cafe, and again, high profit center. And we typically know if we can get somebody in a store, they walk out with more than they would have if they'd have just gone online to buy that one thing. So in that way, too, they saw a lot of value of how do we compete with Napster? How do we anticipate what's going on in the music space? How do we get people in our bricks and mortar retail space? And how do we do it not exactly knowing how the market's going to shape and emerge? So again, took some creative thinking to come up with an idea for them, and the idea that we came up with was essentially a vending machine in the store whereby you could plug in your phone or your MP3 player, choose songs, and download them onto your device. So how is that better than the alternative?
You don't have to buy the whole.
It's more convenient.
Tell me more.
Instead of having to bring it home and do it yourself, you can just do it in the store, like instantly.
Okay, so it's something you can do in the store while you're there. What else is good for the customer with that vending machine model by the song? Versus the existing way, and again, put yourself in 10 years ago of I buy a CD.
Well, I mean, back to like the customer, if the customer has any like problems, then they can go to like customer service.
Okay. If there are technical issues, then there's somebody on site right then and there that can be helpful.
You don't have to buy the full CD.
You don't have to buy 12 songs for $12. You buy the one song you want for $1.
Instead of going from download to computer to device, you could go straight from download to device.
Instead of I buy the CD, I put it into my machine, I put it on my hard drive, I plug in my device, and then I move it over, I can just plug my device right in the vending machine, I can dial up what I want, and it's done. Borders didn't go for that. Now, it's easy in retrospect to say, oh, look how dumb they were. What were their issues?
Wouldn't you have to bring your cord with you for your device, plug it into the machine? Because all
There's some element of, again, attachments and cables and adaptability, but again, that wasn't a major sticking point for them for not adopting it.
Doesn't the phone itself have to have a program that allows all that?
Okay. There's the element of, is there enough of the companion hardware out there, and what's that going to take? But again, there were some norms of how to do it, and people were, again, adept at, I can plug it into my computer and it works. So there was an emerging market. I'm just going to kind of sweep this way. Yep.
Machines cost money.
Okay, there's an expense, but for them it was essentially the cost of a PC in a box and a web connection. So versus what their operating costs were as a company, fairly cheap. Yep.
Maybe they had a fear they weren't going to make enough profit off of it.
There's a fear of, again, is it going to be worth it? Is it going to be profitable? Yep.
Because you have to buy something and then sell things that are cheaper, like individual songs, as opposed to having to buy a full CD.
Well, they would not have to buy. They would have to, again, have an agreement with the labels, with the music distributors, so that we're going to sell on a per-song basis instead of selling on an album basis. What was the sticking point that made them not want to do this?
They had been like selling CDs for a long time. They would have to develop this technology and make all these contracts and stuff. And they probably didn't want to. They just wanted to continue.
It's your element of the first of, well, they've been selling CDs. And is the math going to work out where enough consumers are going to buy enough songs that I'm not going to lose money of consumers that would have otherwise, given no other options, bought the CDs? Does that make sense? So you have a group of consumers, maybe there's a quarter of you that buy CDs. And you may only want one or two songs, but you'll buy the whole CD for that one or two song. And that's a known factor. And I've been doing this for years, and I know what that number is, and I know what my revenues and profits are based on that. Now, there's a bigger group of you that don't buy CDs because you don't want the whole thing, but you might buy a song if it's more convenient than Napster. If the record label makes that song available, you might buy it. And that's a big unknown. But again, for them, that unknown was not worth the difference of let's stick with what we know. And in retrospect, in 2004, 2005, largely iTunes made their existing model somewhat defunct. And in that way, slowly but surely, they've kind of fizzled out. Now, Barnes & Noble has done some other things, but again, when you think about these relationships, a lot of big companies fail because they see the obvious and they're comfortable in what they've been doing. And that's what the advantage often is for entrepreneurs, in that you're not stuck in what you've been doing. You're not committed to expenses that you've already incurred. And we'll talk about some other companies that have been caught with that as well. Another thing to think about is there's this element of left brain, right brain that you might be familiar with, of elements of, am I analytical, am I more creative? It's worth recognizing and worth understanding what the terms are. Fundamentally, I would argue good entrepreneurs have a balance of both of these, of that they can think creatively, they can come up with novel ideas, but what they also do is come up with some ways of implementing that, and or teaming with other people that are going to be helpful in implementing that. So they're able to, again, as a team, bring this element of creativity and implementation to bear. And so you have these three elements. You have the creativity, you have innovation, you also have invention. What's the difference between innovation and invention? Yep.
Well, invention is when you develop a whole new idea or
Okay.
technology. Innovation is just tweaking it or applying it to a new thing or
What's the it?
the technology.
Okay. So invent is I created something new, and then innovation is applying the invention.
Or editing it or changing it slightly to fit a different need.
Okay, to fit a need. Okay, what do you think?
I was gonna say, make it even better.
Well, what's the difference of innovation and invention? What's the difference in the two?
Invention, you're like creating something that isn't already made.
Okay.
Innovation is taking something that is already made and building upon it.
So invention is that creation of a new product. I'll buy that. And then innovation is improving something that already exists. So an innovation cannot be inventive.
The idea, I guess, like how you're making the invention different.
Okay. And that's where a lot of people kind of fall into this gap of we get what invention is. We kind of know what invention. But the innovation, does it have to be something new? Should it be something new?
Doesn't necessarily have to be something new.
Doesn't have to be new.
It helps to.
Might help. Right, so it's somewhat difficult. Again, I would say that there certainly is an overlap area of you have things that might be inventive. I could have a 3-handle plunger for my toilet. Never seen one before. It's inventive. Why could I argue that it might not be innovative?
You only have 2 hands.
Okay. The usability of it, the purpose of it, the benefit is questionable. Can I commercialize it? Can I sell it? Probably not. Not in any volume. So again, just because you invent something doesn't necessarily mean there's a market for it. Doesn't necessarily mean you can build a venture or build a business off of it. So again, as we think about innovation, and we'll connect these terms in a moment, as we think about innovation, there are lots of definitions that are out there. These elements of introducing something new ideas and methods, exploiting, so that's beginning to go down the path of applying or implementing. There's some element of performance, and that in some measure it's not only different than, again, invent typically means different. Performance typically means better. So innovations have some element of better, or have some element of applied, that will differentiate an innovation from an invention. And so for us, at least for our purposes in the course, you can think about commercialized ideas as a good definition for innovation. It's an idea. It might be a new idea. It might be an old idea. It might be a reframed or kind of rethought idea. But that you can in some way bring that to market. You can commercialize that. You can add some value. And people will recognize, adopt, purchase the product of that idea. There's also an adage, particularly in working with highly technical teams, of they want to produce gold-plated Cadillacs. A gold-plated Mercedes. And often it traces back to wanting to develop better. They want the top materials. They want the top performance. What's the problem with that?
Price of gold.
The price. People might like it, but not enough people may like it enough to pay what it is you need them to pay for it to be a profitable venture. So there's a question of how do we design something that people want, but also keep in mind there's a cost and a price associated with it, and being careful that you're designing appropriately for what people are going to be willing to pay for that. In summary, it's important to recognize that creativity ignites innovation. In that way, if you're creative, if you're thinking broadly, you can develop some imaginative solutions. You can maybe connect ideas across different industries. you can also discover opportunities and possible solutions that may not have been thought of before. And that way, again, being innovative, doing something new, doing something novel that has value. Inventions are certainly a piece of the innovation puzzle, but you may have concepts that are inventive that there may not necessarily be a market for. Alternatively, you might have something that's an incremental innovation where you're not inventing something brand new, but you are developing some new ideas and bringing some new things to market or connecting existing ideas. In that way, we think about creativity as an ignition for innovation, but fundamentally we want to think about also the commercialization of these ideas. And so this sets the landscape for that, and we'll be talking going forward about how to put some of these ideas into action.